one photo, one last video, one fatal mistake. For these 6 individuals, the hunt for a viral moment ended in a collision with reality. They chased digital fame, but found the unchangeable laws of physics. The following stories contain descriptions of fatal accidents and are presented as a stark warning. Do not attempt what you are about to see. On the freezing night of April 2nd, 2013, the streets of Newcastle upon Tyne in the United Kingdom were not just cold. They were a silent thermodynamic trap. The wind whipping off the North Sea dropped the temperature to -4 degrees Celsius, turning the urban pavement into a massive, unfeeling refrigerator that drains the life out of anything biological that touches it. Into this invisible kill zone walked Lee Halpin, a 26-year-old filmmaker and aspiring journalist with a sharp mind and a desperate hunger for professional fame. Lee was a child of the digital age who believed that a viral story was the ultimate currency, and he was determined to secure a career-defining position at a major television network. To prove his bravery and dedication, he planned an immersive documentary where he would spend 1 full week living as a homeless person on the streets of his own city. He announced his intentions in a final YouTube video, speaking with the confident, smiling invincibility of a young man who thinks the camera lens is a magical shield that separates him from the real world. He treated the survival situation like a casual weekend camping trip, asking friends on social media to lend him a basic sleeping bag and some warm clothes. He did not realize that the truly destitute survive through a hard-earned library of knowledge, knowing which vents release heat, which cardboard provides insulation, and how to keep the blood moving when the body begins to fail. Lee had none of this data. He only had a camera and a dream. He chose to set up his first camp near the Summerhill Hostel, a building that was ironically boarded up and empty, offering a visual symbol of safety but absolutely zero thermal protection. As the sun set and the city grew quiet, the physics of heat transfer began a systematic assault on his body. The concrete beneath him acted as a relentless heat sink, a solid mass that pulled energy away from his core faster than his metabolism could generate it. The cheap, synthetic sleeping bag he borrowed was designed for indoor use, failing completely to trap the layer of warm air necessary for survival in sub-zero frost. Because he was in a city surrounded by streetlights and familiar houses, he likely felt a false sense of security, believing help was always just a few steps away. But hypothermia is a creeping, neurological predator that disables the brain before it kills the physical body. As his core temperature dropped below 35 degrees Celsius, his body entered the first stage of clinical systemic failure. Violent shivering began as a desperate physiological attempt to generate friction heat, but without insulation, this energy was radiated uselessly into the night air. As the cold reached his inner tissues, his blood began to thicken, and his brain entered a state of cognitive decline. He would have become confused, lethargic, and disoriented, losing the ability to realize he was in danger. Eventually, the shivering stopped, not because he was warm, but because his metabolic fuel was exhausted. He likely drifted into a state of paradoxical peace, a chemical sedation of the dying brain that created an overwhelming, heavy desire to sleep. In these final moments, his body made the ruthless biological decision to sacrifice the extremities, pulling the remaining warm blood into the chest cavity to protect the vital organs. Sometime in the silent hours before dawn, his heart entered a state of fatal arrhythmia. The electrical impulses governing his cardiac rhythm became erratic and finally ceased, resulting in a total cardiac arrest. The mechanism of his life simply stopped. There was no dramatic struggle, only a quiet biological shutdown on a sidewalk he had walked 1,000 times before. When the morning commute began, people walked past the pile of blankets without a second glance, unaware that the young man inside was no longer a journalist, but a statistic. He was eventually discovered by a genuine rough sleeper, a man who knew the rules of the street and realized immediately that the boy was not sleeping. Emergency services arrived, but the biological machine had been offline for too long, and Lee Halpin was pronounced dead at the scene from acute hypothermia. He wanted to shine a light on the plight of the invisible, and in a devastating twist of irony, he succeeded not by filming their lives, but by becoming a permanent frozen reminder of how quickly the human body shatters against the laws of nature. The camera equipment sat uselessly beside his body, a silent witness to a story that ended before the first chapter was finished. Lee died because he prepared for a video shoot, while the reality of the winter was preparing for a kill. His ambition was boundless, but his insulation was not, and the concrete cared nothing for his dreams. This tragedy serves as a grim warning that the digital world and the physical world operate by very different rules. In the early morning hours of May 15, 2011, the city of Brisbane, Australia, was a grid of glowing streetlights and quiet skyscrapers. But on the 7th floor of an apartment complex at Kangaroo Point, a young man was preparing to gamble his life for a digital image. Acton Beale was 20 years old, full of energy, and eager to participate in the first truly global viral craze of the social media era known as planking. The rules of this trend were simple and absurd. A person had to lie face down, perfectly flat and stiff like a wooden board, in the most unusual or dangerous place they could find. The prize was not money or a trophy. The prize was a collection of likes and comments on a Facebook wall. By 2011, this meme had become a digital virus, pushing young people to outdo each other with increasingly risky stunts. Acton was spending the night with his friends, and the atmosphere was filled with the casual bravado of youth. They were looking for the perfect shot, something that would stand out in a feed full of mundane photos. Acton looked at the balcony railing of the apartment. It was a narrow strip of smooth painted metal, only about 2 inches wide. Beyond that thin line of steel was nothing but 60 feet of empty air and a solid concrete sidewalk below. To a rational mind, this was a death trap. But to someone chasing a viral moment, it was a stage. Acton climbed onto the railing while his friends held up their phones, their screens acting as the primary witnesses to the event. He lay down on his stomach, balancing his entire body weight on that 2-inch strip of metal. He straightened his arms and legs, stiffening his muscles to achieve the perfect plank pose. His friends watched through their viewfinders, focused on the framing of the shot rather than the physical reality of the situation. This is the moment where the human desire for attention collided with the cold, unfeeling laws of Newtonian physics. The metal railing was slick, and Acton's clothing offered almost no friction. He was a 160-pound mass, balanced on a pivot point, with zero margin for error. As he attempted to adjust his position for the camera, his center of gravity shifted just a fraction of an inch to the side. In the world of physics, this was the point of no return. Gravity is a force that does not negotiate and does not recognize a joke. In a split second, the smooth metal surface betrayed his grip. His body began to tilt, and the momentum of his falling weight became impossible to stop. There was a frantic, desperate scramble as his hands clawed at the air, but he was already moving too fast. The descent from the 7th floor took less than 3 seconds. To the friends on the balcony, it was a blur of movement followed by a sickening silence. During the fall, Acton was no longer a person with a future or a name. He was an object accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared. The impact with the ground was absolute. Upon contact with the concrete pavement, Acton suffered catastrophic blunt force trauma to his entire system. The kinetic energy of the fall resulted in a total systemic failure and immediate cardiac arrest. It was a fatal injury that occurred in a fraction of a second. There was no time for a hospital or a rescue. The physics of the impact had already decided the outcome. Emergency crews arrived shortly after, but they could only document the aftermath of a choice that could never be taken back. The silence on the street was a heavy contrast to the digital noise Acton had hoped to create. The photo he wanted was never posted, but the story of his fall went around the world, turning him into a tragic cautionary tale for a generation obsessed with the screen. In the days that followed, the Australian government issued public warnings about the dangers of viral stunts. But for Acton, the trend had already reached its ultimate final conclusion. His Facebook profile remained a digital ghost, a collection of memories interrupted by a 3-second mistake. This tragedy highlights a terrifying shift in human behavior, where the quest for a dopamine hit from a social media notification can override the most basic instinct of self-preservation. Acton Beale did not die for a cause or a belief. He died for a pixelated lie. The balcony railing at Kangaroo Point is still there, a cold piece of construction that remains indifferent to the life that was lost on its edge. It serves as a grim reminder that while the internet is a world of infinite chances, the physical world only gives you one. The concrete below does not care about your followers, and gravity never misses its target. Acton sought to be a part of something big, and in the end, he became a permanent warning that the cost of a viral photo is often far higher than anyone is prepared to pay. He fell through the gap between digital fame and physical reality, leaving behind only a grieving family and a lesson written in stone. On the morning of March 24, 2013, the high desert near Moab, Utah, was a landscape of ancient red sandstone and deep, echoing silence. But the stillness was about to be shattered by a fatal failure of human logic. The Corona Arch is a massive natural bridge that stands 140 feet tall, a breathtaking monument of stone that had recently become a viral hotspot for a dangerous new stunt called rope swinging. It was an era where the quest for digital fame was beginning to override basic survival instincts, and 22-year-old Kyle Lee Stocking was a young man who wanted to be at the center of that movement. Kyle was energetic, adventurous, and deeply influenced by extreme videos he had seen online, specifically those showing thrill seekers soaring through the arch on massive ropes to the cheers of millions of viewers. He didn't want a simple hike. He wanted to create a viral masterpiece that would cement his legacy in the world of extreme content. Kyle and his group of friends arrived at the arch with a collection of climbing gear, but they lacked the one thing necessary for such a high-stakes stunt: professional engineering expertise. They were not riggers or physics experts. They were enthusiasts who believed that a GoPro and a basic understanding of knots were enough to conquer the canyon. They spent the early hours of the day setting up a complex rope system, intending to turn Kyle into a human pendulum that would swing through the opening of the arch at incredible speeds. The plan seemed simple to their untrained minds: measure the height of the arch, cut the rope so it was shorter than the distance to the ground, and jump. But simplicity is a dangerous trap when dealing with the unyielding laws of physics. They failed to account for the specific nature of the equipment they were using. Climbing ropes are designed with high-tension nylon fibers that are meant to stretch significantly under load to absorb the shock of a fall. Furthermore, they did not calculate the massive increase in centrifugal force that occurs at the bottom of a high-speed arc, which pulls a moving body much further toward the earth than a static measurement would suggest. Kyle stood on the edge of the sandstone cliff, looking out over the vast, dry horizon, while his friends positioned their cameras to capture the jump from every possible angle. He was focused on the shot, the framing, and the future views, while the objective world was preparing for a collision. He stepped off the ledge and surrendered his weight to gravity. For the first few seconds, it was exactly what he had imagined: a rush of pure adrenaline as he fell through the thin desert air at nearly 70 miles per hour. But as he reached the lowest point of the swing, The rope reached its limit and began to do exactly what it was engineered to do. It stretched. Under the massive kinetic energy of his moving mass, the rope elongated by several feet, turning a safe flight into a direct path toward the canyon floor. Kyle did not swing through the air. He hit the hard sandstone ground at terminal speed, while still under the full tension of the rope. The impact was absolute and final. He suffered catastrophic blunt force trauma across his entire skeletal structure, resulting in massive internal injuries and immediate systemic failure of all biological processes. The force of the collision was so great that his heart stopped the moment his frame hit the rock, resulting in an instant fatal injury. The sound of the impact echoed through the canyon like a gunshot, followed by a heavy, suffocating silence that replaced the cheers of his friends. The cameras were still recording, but they were no longer documenting a triumph. They were recording the dust slowly settling over a body in the quiet of the Utah desert. His friends stood on the cliffs above, holding their digital devices paralyzed by the realization that their mathematical error had ended a life in a fraction of a second. In the weeks following the tragedy, the Bureau of Land Management officially banned rope swinging at the Corona Arch and other natural bridges in the area, recognizing that the hunt for social media validation was turning public monuments into sites of preventable death. The arch remains today, a beautiful and ancient piece of stone that is completely indifferent to the humans who try to use it for content. Kyle Lee Stocking died because he treated a dangerous physical reality like a video game where you can just restart the level if you make a mistake. But gravity does not have a reset button, and the desert does not offer second chances to those who forget the weight of their own choices. He sought to fly for a few seconds of footage, but he was grounded forever by a calculation that was off by just a few feet, proving that when the thirst for views replaces respect for physics, the cost is often written in stone. In August 2013, the Spanish town of Villaseca de la Sagra was a place of extreme heat and ancient violent tradition. The air was thick with the smell of dry dust and old stone. This was the festival of the Bull Run. For hundreds of years, this event required total focus. A runner had to watch every shadow. They had to listen for every hoofbeat. But 32-year-old David Gonzalez Lopez brought something new to the narrow streets. He brought a smartphone. David was not a professional runner. He was a man who lived through his screen. He did not just want to see the bulls. He wanted to own the moment in high definition. He wanted to show his digital world a view that no one else had. As the wooden gates creaked open, the ground began to shake. Massive fighting bulls were released into the town. These animals are 500 kilograms of pure muscle. They can run at 35 kilometers per hour. Most people were running for their lives. They were climbing the wooden barricades called talanqueras. But David was standing still. He stepped out into the middle of the street. His eyes were locked onto a 4-inch piece of glass. He was adjusting the zoom. He was looking for the perfect framing. This is the moment where the digital world collided with the physical world. David was experiencing a psychological state called digital blindness. Because he was looking through a lens, his brain felt safe. The screen acted like a wall. It made the danger feel like a movie. He was perfectly focused on one bull that was far down the street. He didn't see the other one. A massive black bull was charging from his side. The crowd began to scream. Hundreds of people were yelling for him to move, but David heard nothing. His brain was in a state of deep tunnel vision. He was seeing the world in 2 dimensions, while death was coming in 3. He stood like a statue of modern vanity. He was a 160-pound man in the path of a half-ton projectile. The bull hit him at full speed. There was no time to run. There was no time to scream. The impact was absolute. David suffered massive blunt force trauma to the thoracic and cervical regions. The force of the bull's head and horns caused an immediate fracture of the upper vertebrae. This resulted in a fatal injury to the spinal cord and the medulla oblongata. The kinetic energy was so high that his heart stopped before his body hit the pavement. It was a total systemic failure. The style of his life ended in a clinical statement of fact. His body was thrown several meters across the dusty ground. The bull did not stop. It continued its charge, indifferent to the life it had just ended. The crowd fell into a shocked, heavy silence. In the middle of the street, David's phone lay in the dirt. The screen was cracked, but the camera was still recording. The device captured the legs of the running crowd. It captured the dust and the red Spanish sun. It was a digital ghost of the moment a man traded his life for a file. This tragedy changed the town forever. The local government passed new laws immediately. It is now a crime to hold a phone during a bull run. You can be fined thousands of euros just for taking a selfie near the animals. The town returned to its routine, but the memory of that afternoon is a grim warning. David Gonzalez Lopez did not die because he was slow. He died because he was distracted by a pixelated lie. He forgot that the world beyond the lens is heavy and unforgiving. He sought to capture a moment of excitement, but he only captured his own mortality. In the end, the screen offered zero protection. The bull did not care about the framing of the shot. The pavement cared nothing for his followers. The tradition continued, but it was haunted by the shadow of a man who looked at a predator through a camera and did not realize it was looking back. This is the reality of the digital age. We watch our lives instead of living them. And sometimes, while we are busy adjusting the focus, the real world moves in for the kill. The phone remained a cold plastic object in the dust, a silent witness to a life cut short for a video that no one needed to see. David's story is now a permanent part of the festival's history, a lesson written in blood and stored in the cloud. We are the only species that will walk into a charging bull because we are busy looking at a picture of one. The final frame of his life was a blur of black fur and blue sky. Then there was only blackness. The recording ended. The life ended. The laws of physics remained. In April 2013, the deep waters of Lake Naivasha in Kenya were a beautiful and deceptive trap. The air was thick with the scent of wild grass and the humid, heavy smell of the Great Rift Valley. This is a place where nature still follows its own ancient and brutal rules, far away from the safety of the modern city. Into this landscape walked Chang Liu, a 30-year-old tourist from China. She arrived with a high-end digital camera and a dangerous misunderstanding of the world around her. Chang belonged to a generation that lived through the screen. She was part of a culture that viewed the wilderness as a beautiful backdrop for a travel blog rather than a physical reality. She was looking for a macro shot, a high-definition close-up that would capture the fine details of the wild to share with her followers. She was suffering from a psychological state where the camera lens acts as a fake shield, making the person feel like a spectator in a theater instead of a participant in the food chain. This is often called the Disney effect. People see wild animals on a screen and believe they are friendly characters instead of powerful predators. Or on this warm evening, Chang spotted something that looked like a perfect photo opportunity: a baby hippo. To a casual tourist, a hippo calf looks like a clumsy and harmless creature from a cartoon. To a biologist, a hippo calf is the most dangerous biological trigger in all of Africa. The hippopotamus is not a gentle giant. It is a 2-ton engine of territorial aggression. Hippos are highly sensitive, extremely fast, and possess a bite force that can crush a small vehicle. They kill more people in Africa than lions or crocodiles combined. Chang ignored the strict warnings provided by the lodge staff. She ignored the signs telling her to keep a safe distance from the water. She believed that her camera's zoom would keep her safe, but she wanted to get even closer for a better shot. She left the designated safety of the path and stepped into the tall grass near the lake. She was focused on her screen, adjusting the focus to see the reflection in the calf's eyes. This was the moment where her world of vacation photos collided with the reality of maternal instinct. The mother hippo was submerged nearby, invisible beneath the dark surface of the lake. In the mind of the animal, Chang was not a photographer. She was a predator threatening her offspring. The hippo moved with incredible speed, lunging from the water like a freight train. There was no time for Chang to run, and no time to realize her fatal error. The mother hippo struck her with the force of a high-speed collision. The narrative now shifts to the clinical reality of the consequence. Chang Liu suffered massive blunt force trauma to the chest and abdominal cavity. The impact caused catastrophic structural failure of the skeletal system, including multiple fractures to the rib cage and spine. The force of the animal resulted in the displacement of internal organs and the total collapse of the respiratory system. This was a fatal injury that occurred in a fraction of a second. The kinetic energy was so immense that all biological functions ceased immediately. Her heart stopped upon impact. The hippo did not see a person with dreams. It saw a threat and neutralized it with mechanical precision. The animal then retreated back into the dark water with its calf, leaving a heavy silence over the shore. The lodge staff arrived within minutes, but there was no resuscitation possible. The biological machine had been destroyed. On the grass, the digital camera lay near her hand. The screen was still glowing with the last image she'd tried to capture. The photo of the calf was perfectly framed, but the person who took it was gone. This tragedy forced the Kenyan government to tighten security at lodges and issue even more aggressive warnings to visitors. The lake remains calm today, its beauty hiding the ancient laws that govern the water. The hippos still watch the shore, indifferent to the cameras and the tourists. They are waiting for the next person who forgets that, in the wild, the only thing that matters is the distance between life and death. Nature is not a park, and it does not offer second chances to those who forget the rules. The laws of biology do not care about your vacation photos or your social media profile. The final frame of her life was a beautiful image of a calf, followed by the cold reality of a predator. Her story remains a permanent record of what happens when we value a photo more than our own survival. We are the only species that will walk into a death trap because we are busy looking at a picture of it. The camera was a silent witness to a life cut short for a video that no one needed to see. The recording ended, and the life ended, but the rules of the wild remain the same as they have been for 1,000,000 years. The concrete and the grass do not care about your plans. They only care about the weight of your choices. On April 28, 2013, the massive stone pillars of the Coronation Bridge in West Bengal stood high above the gray, churning waters of the Teesta River, creating a scene of colonial power and natural force. This bridge was not just a road. On this day, it was the stage for a performance that hundreds of people had gathered to witness and record. The sunlight was bright, and the air was thick with the scent of river mud and the anticipation of a festive crowd. The man at the center of this attention was Sailendra Nath Roy, a 50-year-old police officer who lived a double life as a daredevil. Roy was not satisfied with a normal career. He had a deep burning need for global validation and a place in the Guinness World Records. He wanted to be more than a local hero. He wanted to be a digital legend whose feats of strength would live forever on the internet. His plan for the day was a grotesque challenge to the human body. He intended to cross the 180-meter span of the river on a zip line, suspended entirely by his own hair. He had spent years growing a reinforced ponytail, which was now attached to a small metal pulley on a steel wire 70 feet above the dangerous rapids. Roy looked out at the wall of mobile phones and professional cameras pointed at him and felt the surge of adrenaline that comes with public fame. He pushed off from the ledge, beginning his slow slide across the river. For the first half of the journey, the physics of the stunt seemed to hold. He moved steadily, a human being hanging by a biological thread between the sky and the water. But then, at the midpoint of the wire, the rhythmic sound of the pulley changed to a sharp grinding noise. The mechanism jammed. The human world of records and applause suddenly shattered against the objective reality of mechanical friction. Roy was trapped 70 feet in the air, with the entire weight of his body pulling against the roots of his scalp and the muscles of his neck. This is where the time began to move with an agonizing slowness. For 25 minutes, Roy fought a losing battle to save his own life. He reached up with his hands, trying to pull his weight along the wire, but the metal pulley refused to budge. He kicked his legs in the air, his body twisting in a frantic dance of survival that became more desperate with every passing second. But a terrifying, psychological phenomenon was occurring on the bridge. The spectators did not realize he was in danger. Because they were watching the struggle through the small screens of their phones, they believed his agony was part of the show. They thought the delay was a scripted piece of drama designed to make the record attempt more exciting. They laughed, they cheered, and they continued to film as a man's life force began to drain away. Inside Roy's body, the physical and emotional stress was reaching a breaking point. The sheer effort of hanging by his hair, combined with the massive surge of panic and adrenaline, placed an impossible load on his cardiovascular system. His heart was racing at a rate that the biological machine could not sustain. The style of the story now shifts to the clinical reality of the result. Roy suffered a massive systemic failure of his cardiovascular functions. The extreme physiological stress resulted in a fatal cardiac arrest while he was still suspended over the water. The electrical impulses governing his heart became erratic and then ceased entirely. It was a total biological shutdown. His body went limp, swinging silently on the wire like a discarded object. It took several more minutes for the cheers to turn into a suffocating silence as the crowd slowly realized that the performance had ended in a permanent shutdown. Emergency crews eventually reached him, but the biological machine had been offline for too long to be revived. Sailendra Nath, Roy had sought to etch his name into history through a feat of impossible strength, but he ended up becoming a monument to the fatal danger of public vanity. The artifact of his life was the single steel wire that remained stretched across the river, with his silent form still attached to it for all to see. He died because he treated his existence like a piece of content for an audience that could not tell the difference between a stunt and a tragedy. The Teesta River continued to flow below, indifferent to the fame he sought and the price he paid to find it. The pursuit of the extraordinary ended in a very ordinary biological failure. His heart was strong, but it was not strong enough to carry the weight of his own ambition. The wire stood as a silent witness to a life lost for a record that was never finished, and a video that no one needed to see. This event forced a change in how public stunts were regulated in the region, but for Roy, the laws of physics had already delivered their final judgment. He traded his future for a moment of attention, and the world watched until the screen went black. 6 stories, 6 people who gambled with physics and lost. This leaves us with a difficult question about the nature of fame. What is the greater tragedy here? To die failing to become a legend, or to succeed and be remembered forever only for your final, fatal mistake? Leave your thoughts below. If this video made you think, subscribe and support the channel with a like.